Tienen que elegir el idioma. Para el que quieren traducción, el imagen de globo
The
en blanco con
language
colores
that you
oscuros.
wish to have translation
Dependiendo del
on
sitio
the
internet
bottom
translation
right of
in
the
Arabic,
screen.
English, Spanish is being provided for this event. You just need to click on the icon of a globe at the bottom of your screen and select the language for which you need interpretation. Muy buenos días y muchas gracias por
Good
sumarse
morning,
a
and
este
thank you very much for
importante evento
joining this new webinar
de la Fundación Chile del
of
Pacífico, con
the
el
Chilean
propósito de
Pacific
divulgar las
Foundation,
actividades digitales
with which we
para
continue our
beneficio de
digital
todos,
activities
a
to
veces
explore and
considerando
highlight
prácticas
concrete and high
que
impact
cada vez más
advances
rentables
in the
vinculado con la
increasingly
sostenibilidad del
sustainable
desarrollo, como
management
es
of
el caso de
strategic
minería.
industries in our country,
Este
such
evento
as
siguió el año
mining.
pasado en
Indeed,
esta casa,
this event
realizado
follows
en
another last year where we
colaboración con la
highlighted and
ICMM.
analyzed the
Esta
effects of
mañana
circular
vamos a
economy
conversar
practices
sobre
in the
una
mining
actividad que
industry.
fue un hito en la
This morning,
evolución
we
de la
will
principal actividad económica
focus
de Chile,
on the
que
measure
ahora
that
recibe la
marks a
reconocimiento
milestone in the evolution
internacional
of
y
Chile's
es
main
la
economic
trazabilidad de
activity
emisiones.
since the
Esta
recently
reconocimiento
installed Scope
incorpora en su
3
conjunto la
Emissions
evaluación
Traceability
continua
Board
de metas
incorporates the
de
entire supply
reducción y
chain
reducción de gases
and
de
promises to
efecto
take
invernadero.
significant steps in the control and
Dependiendo de
reduction
sus
of
estándares
greenhouse
internacionales
gases.
del
In
cual
this way,
contribuye
the
a
main
mitigar
industrial
los
sector of the
efectos
country
del clima
contributes to the general
atribuyendo
goals
niveles
of national
superiores de sostenibilidad
decarbonization,
en muchos
something that
sectores.
we know
A modo de
commits
introducción,
increasingly
mencionaré
public and
tres
private
áreas
efforts in many
económicas de
areas.
emisión directas que no
By way
están
of
ni bien
introduction, Scope
controladas
3
ni bien
emissions cover
monitorizadas.
all
Estas
indirect emissions that are
son
not
emisiones
owned or
de
controlled directly by mining
las
companies, but
agriculturas
that are an
tienen
integral part of their value
emisiones
chain.
residuales contenidas en
This
el
is
atmósfera.
an
Estamos hablando
unprecedented
de
step and
países como
involves a significant number of
Unión
world's
Europea,
leading mining
gracias
companies,
a la Fundación Chile
several which operate
Pacific,
in
una
Chile,
de ellas
and we are
constituye
very
hoy como uno de los
proud of
principales
this,
cimientos
partners of the foundation that I have the honor of
de
presenting.
a la
Two of
minería.
them are represented
Emissions
today here
Traceability
with
Group,
very knowledgeable panelists, whom I will formally introduce shortly, and I am referring to Teck
es una
Resources and
plataforma con base en
Freeport
conocimiento técnico y
McMoRaN.
orientada a desarrollar
Scope 3 emissions
estrategias
traceability
de
roundtable is a
responsabilidad con el
true
medio
alliance
ambiente,
based on the technical knowledge,
estableciendo nuevos estándares y
and
metodologías
this will
de mitigación
develop
de reportes.
sustainable
Mediante la incorporación de
aspects in the
prácticas
country's
análogas
main
y la
economic activity.
colaboración,
To this end, it
esta
standardizes
organización
measurement and
permite
reporting
comience la
and
implementación
methodologies
en
through the
regiones
incorporation of global
para reducir
practices such as the ICMM,
todo
also
esto suma
being
certificación
represented in this
y
panel.
colaboración con los
To all
países
this, we add
vecinos,
training
todo
and
lo cual
collaboration with
fortalece el
industry
ecosistema
suppliers,
y permite una
all of
definición
which
clara del modelo de
strengthens the mining
desarrollo
ecosystem and
sostenible.
allows a clear presentation
Esta
of the
principal
carbon footprint
experiencia que
of
esperamos
products
compartir
and
con las
services. In
industrias
short,
y
this is a precedent that we hope will be
organizaciones
replicated
desarrolladoras
in other
para lograr
industries
una mesa
and
sustentable en
of
Chile
which we
y
hope to
en
learn
el
in
mundo.
greater detail, for which we have put
Viviana
together a
Huerta,
panel
quien es la
of
Director
experts.
Senior de
We'll
Programas de
start with
Innovación
Viviana
en el
Huerta,
International Council
Senior
on Mining and
Manager
Metals,
of Innovation Programs
ICMM,
at the International Council of Mining
representando
and
además en
Metals,
Londres el
ICMM,
Fomento al Desarrollo
London-based
Sostenible de la
international
Minería,
organization
donde
for the
requiere una
promotion of
membresía
sustainable development
única
in
para
mining,
los sectores
making it a
privados.
unique
Esta
entity for the
organización
industry,
toma costos
removed from
sobre
commercial
sus espaldas.
considerations with 100%
Viviana
focus on
llegó a
environmental and social
ICMM en
sustainability.
2021
Viviana
para
joined
supervisar el
ICMM in
desarrollo de la
2022
tecnología
to
de
support work
economía circular
on climate change,
y seguridad
circular
nuclear.
economy, health,
Ha
and
contribuido
safety and tailings.
internacional
Before
para
joining
promover el
ICMM,
desarrollo de
she
capacidad
worked as a
humana para
consultant in
energías
human capital development
limpias,
for energy
renovable
transition
y
in the
sustentables
Chilean
y
Ministry of
además
Energy. She has
certificada
an
en
extensive
análisis de
experience in
energías
both the
renovables
public and private
y
sectors in
sostenibles,
renewable energy,
tanto en
energy
materia de
innovation,
sostenibilidad
climate
como
change, and
social.
environmental
Luego de
sustainability
presentar
projects.
a Milton Valdés, quien
Afterwards,
es ingeniero
we'll
en
introduce
operaciones
Milton
de
Valdés,
Freeport McMoRan,
Senior Climate
comentamos
Engineer
que
at
Valdés
Freeport
en la industria
McMoRaN,
minería ha desempeñado
with
cargos en el área de
more than a
gestión,
decade of
gestión
experience in the
y
copper mining
supervisión
industry, has held various
de
positions in
sostenibilidad
business
en
projects,
diferentes
commercial innovation, and
organizaciones.
sustainability,
Milton se ha
where he
enfocado en
finally
temas de cambio
settled.
climático y los
Milton
desafíos que
has
enfrenta la
focused on
industria
climate
en
change
este
issues and the
contexto.
challenges it
Con una
brings to the industry
experiencia
with
de
various
2
stakeholders.
años área
He
de
joined
implementación
Freeport in
específica.
2021,
Además,
and since
conoce
that
las
year, he
prioridades
supports the
nacionales en
regional
el cambio climático.
consideration and
Actualmente
coordination of
participa en
these
foros
issues,
globales de
in addition to
implementación
participating in national trade
y
discussions on climate change.
internacional trabaja
He is
con
currently part of the
instituciones
global Scope
internacionales.
3 emissions
Otro
discussions,
ejemplo
ICMM groups, and
importante
other
es Herman
initiatives.
Urrejola,
And
que
finally,
participa en
Herman
gestión social en
Urrejola,
comunidades y
Director
medio
of
ambiente
Social,
en
Community, and
países.
Environmental
En
Management at
minería,
Teck
Herman
Resources.
se ha desempeñado en
Previously,
funciones ligadas a la gestión
Herman
social
held
para
positions
regiones
related to
y
social
comunidades
environmental
en
management
este
at Teck,
comunitario en el Centro
as well
Nacional
as head of
de
community
Investigaciones
relations at ICEN,
Ambientales y
transmission
Sociales
and
CEA.
expert
También tiene
consultant
experiencia en el sector
in
público
social
en
environmental
proyectos de
studies
gestión
in Gestión
sostenible
Social
y
SA, Chile. He's also holds experience in the public sector in these areas, having served as the regional director of National Environmental Commission in Los Rios region and also head of the extension of National Forestry Corporation in Lumaco. Without further ado, I will give the floor to the first panelist, Viviana. I'd like to remind everybody that after this, we have a Q&A session, and I invite everybody to write down their questions in the chat or to use the Q&A button on Zoom to write down your questions, and that way we can compile the best questions from the audience. Viviana, the floor is yours, and welcome. Sorry, welcome, Milton. I see that you were able to come in.
Gracias, Loreto.
Thank you, Loreto.
Y buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Milton. Viviana, go ahead. Good morning. Thank you, Loreto, for the kind invitation and participating in this interesting webinar. It's a very interesting topic, and we're making great efforts to reduce these types of emissions, which hold a huge impact in global emissions. You already introduced me. I work in ICMM, which is an international organization that gathers a total of 25 mining companies around the world that together they are a third of world mining, and that they share the interest of developing mining in a responsible, fair, and safe manner. And we promote this to work together to reach sustainability. And apart from these members, we also have 42 national and commodity association members in commodities, which are part of the organization, and that they also share our vision of developing mining in a sustainable manner. The work related to Scope 3 starts in ICMM in October 2021, where we launched our latest climate change position statements, and with all the member companies that they have to commit to fulfill these levels. And it was established that all the members commit to being carbon neutral in Scope 1 and 2 for the year 2050 or sooner, establishing short and medium term goals. Furthermore, with regards to Scope 3 emissions, the members commit to measure, report, and establish reduction goals for Scope 3 GHG for the year 2023 or as soon as possible in the case that that goal wasn't able to be fulfilled according to the various challenges. So therefore, to establish goals of Scope 3 as soon as possible. We've been working on this focus to support the member companies to, first of all, measure their emissions consistently and to support them in this process. Now, with regards to the emissions in mining, we have site Scope 1 emissions that are due to fuel on site. And to reduce this, we have an innovation, which is an innovation for cleaner vehicles. This is an initiative that we're working together with the OEMs. Technologies to have zero emission vehicles. The first goal was for 2030, and we've actually moved that up, and we have zero emission vehicles for types of trucks and loading vehicles that will move material around using these routes that have very steep slopes. So it's a huge technological challenge, and we're working together with our members and the OEMs to be able to develop this type of technology. Important work in decarbonizing on-site mining for renewable energies. We're carrying out a lot of on-site renewable energy, but in our value chain, we're well aware that there is a great amount of emissions produced in mining, which is up to 98% of the total emissions that are produced in the value chain, which is the use of mining products to transport, acquisition of materials as well. Therefore, we've been working with our members in being able to tackle these types of emissions in such a way that mining can provide the critical ore for energy transition. Everything that is energy transition depends on mining, PV and others, and also supporting circular economy principles to create greater efficiencies in the mining materials that are generated. And in that way, we can reduce emissions. And as we said before, to supply critical materials for transition, but if these create an important carbon footprint to tackle that as well. As you said before, Loreto, the scope 3 emissions are those that are produced in the value chain, upstream and downstream, and outside of the control, the direct control of the mining company. So this is, for example, through the use of fuel, through the consumption of electricity, which is transmitted through the electrical network. Scope 3 has to do with all the acquisition of transport, equipment, services, transport of raw materials, prime materials, and the product is sold, the future use and final disposition. All of these have to be considered as part of the carbon footprint circle, and we're working towards reducing that. And we started, first of all, with the launch, the creation of a guideline to be able to measure and report that scope 3 emissions are consistent within the mining sector. This work is based on the GHG protocol for the scope 3 gases, which is a well-known protocol. And this is a very high-level guide that is applicable to all the various productive sectors. Therefore, when we try to apply it in mining, we saw some gaps, which means that we can do it in various manners, and to be able to do it consistently in the mining sector, we wish to clear those initial doubts from the protocol. And to also develop it, we took into consideration other guidelines and methodologies developed for specific scope 3, such as oil and gas, chemicals, and cement, and also the methodologies that our members had developed for scope 3. I believe that they've been measuring their emissions for many years. We took that methodology to make sure that our guide was flexible, applicable to everything that was already happening. And together with these items, the guide, of course, had a review from the International Regulations Board, a panel of volunteers, a panel of volunteers, and other guidelines that were of public knowledge in such a way that we could make sure that this guide is aligned with the treatment. And we built it together with an external consult process to make sure that it's aligned with the expectations of the important stakeholders that are externally, not just with internal members, but also with an external point of view. And here, together with the guide for emissions launched September 7th, this is published on our website. We worked on the creation of this guide to support our members in the whole sector in establishing reduction goals for scope 3, which is the second step. And here the idea is to establish reduction goals to reduce the most relevant emissions. This is collaborative work that's going to be done together with partnerships with our suppliers and with our clients. This guide also gathers the regulations and standards that have been developed on the international level and local level. And it also provides a framework so that the companies can reach the level of maturity they need as they advance through time. They deliver on how to improve all the areas. The 5 key dimensions that we've included to establish goals in a responsible manner, goals that can be achieved. And this guideline also presents flexibility so that each company can set their own goals, but it delivers guidelines on the analysis that must be performed to be able to reach their own goals. So it tackles the various dimensions such as measurement and reporting of emissions, identification of hotspots, where these are the most important and highest emissions in the value chain, the integration in the various businesses and alignment, the analysis of the decarbonization pathways, which have been developed already, and the organizational governance. It includes these 5 dimensions and basically an evolution of how we can improve upon each one of these dimensions until we reach an optimum state where this helps establishing the goals in a responsible manner. And together with the work that we developed last year and the guidelines, we see that we need to work in collaboration in the reduction of emissions so that these can be done more efficiently and to join our strength in reducing scope 3 emissions. If we do it together, we could achieve better results and have a shorter response time, especially in having an impact. This can have a very important impact in the emissions that are generated on the world level, since mining is present in almost all the production activities. And that would be it. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Viviana, for showing us this very interesting work that is done for the transformation. And as we see it, it's not easy. And that's why we have these guidelines, one for the accounting and reporting, and the other one for target setting guidance. Because working with the suppliers, such as in the mining industry, are many, and to have them aligned to see the costs, well, it's a complex matter. We're going to talk to you again in the Q&A period to talk about the work and perhaps see how other companies can join this initiative. Very interesting work, especially in reducing the GHG emissions. So thank you very much. I see that we have Milton back again. Now we're going to give Herman the word. Please go ahead, Herman. Well, thank you very much, Loreto. I'm not able to start my videos, so if you can please give me that opportunity. So right. In the meantime, we'll fix the video. In the meantime, thank you very much, Loreto, for the opportunity in participating in this webinar. Perhaps I'd like to just present very briefly. I'm the Director of Social Management in Teck, which is a mining company that has many operations in Chile in various projects. And mainly we focus on the copper production, and we also saw the sales of various sites. So we're focused more on copper and zinc and not coal. So we sold our coal operations, and we're soon to ship in Iquique, and this is related to Quebrada Blanca Phase 2. This also generates a series of challenges and opportunities in emissions management. I'd like to just briefly state that in the conversation that we're having today, which is associated to the traceability of level 3 emissions, scope 3 emissions, it's something that's happening right now. It's something that is starting. There is a great amount of goodwill and association among the various mining companies to tackle this line of work, to which this adds to all the other efforts that the mining sector has made in reducing the emissions and greenhouse gases. We can give you some examples, such as the implementation of autonomous trucks, electric vehicles, everything related to the use of renewables in our energy matrix. So therefore, this process is one more step that mining will take in order to fulfill the expectations of society and the expectations that are seen and held by the shareholders and people interested in sustainability. Perhaps if we could go down, if we could perhaps roll out information that the colleague from ICMM gave. There's 3 types of scopes. Scope 3 is almost 51%, which is a huge block that we can work on effectively in the mining process. Just recently, we saw the creation of this association among the various mining companies to have the traceability of scope 3 emissions. We're going to see this a little bit later, that in mining, it's not just a measurement, it's about how we actively follow up and accompany the value chain and supply chain to create better conditions and standards, maintaining other great concerns in mining, which is diversifying and increasing the suppliers and mining together with development of local capacity. I believe that there's many lines of work that are crossing over, and this is added to other efforts such as biodiversity and conservation, and together with the various efforts such as carbon neutral companies, this creates a great commitment in sustainability and sustainability management. Now, recently we had the methodological guide published for scope 3 emissions. This year, we're going to have a piloting with providers to be able to carry out this emissions process. And just as you saw in the chart, we've had sessions of this executive committee, and we're able to take a more active role since 2024 onwards to be able to tackle the first results. The important work from here onwards has to do with the development of the capacity, development of the local suppliers, and also the support various stakeholders, public and private, to generate this ecosystem, a mining ecosystem, so to say. And we've seen that it's been working intensively to coordinate these efforts, and the methodological guide is available. It's based greatly on the various other guides. So from the methodological concept level, we see that there is an interesting level of detail, and perhaps what we're missing today is having the capacities at the companies and the stakeholders that participate in this measurement. That's to say, inside the mining companies or in the specialized consulting companies. A series of methodologies and opportunities of the company and institutions, and the building of capacities in companies and institutions. This initiative takes us to take a first step in the conversation on more efficient processes, productive processes that have a greater level of visibility above the emissions and other externalities. This will open a great level of conversations for inclusion with the government and the local ecosystems in how to support these efforts and to not have them be disconnected from an initiative. I don't know how to call it, but let's say that's elitist, so to say. If we have the comparative analysis with other situations that the various suppliers are living through. So being very honest, this is a work in progress, and we believe that mining is a leader in initiative. There's a long path to go down. We still need greater capacity to grow and to advance. So in reality, this working table, opens up an enormous opportunity for work and development, not just for the mining companies and local suppliers, but also for the technical people that are involved. Thank you very much. Especially for sharing the experience from Teck's point of view and participating in this working table. It's very interesting to see the work that you've done and that you're starting. You've been working a little over 6 months, and I imagine that you're starting to work with the providers. There's a long path to go towards, and we're going to get back to you for the Q&A period to ask about your experience and to see if this has been replicated in other industries. And well, we're going to have more questions. So I'd like to also invite our participants, the audience, to please go ahead and write down your questions in the chat or the Q&A button. So we're still trying to solve the videos, and now we're going to make a quick pause. Our interpreter is helping us, who's also our Zoom assistant, is helping us out. He's multi-purpose, and but
a nuestra audiencia, pero la tecnología es así.
Okay. Loreto, no sé si me escuchas.
¿Pueden prender sus cámaras?
En mi caso sí, igual
¿Sí?
Loreto, a mí no me deja prenderla.
Yo puedo, pero yo ya hablé, así que no soy más relevante ahora.
Yo no.
Qué curioso, es muy raro. Y Milton, tú tampoco, no te vamos a conocer, Milton.
Lamentablemente. No, efectivamente, no, me sale que el host ha detenido probablemente las facultades para compartir el video.
A ver, dice que haga de co-host a ti, Milton. A ver, te voy a hacer co-host, ¿ya? A ver si puedes, make co-host, a ver. Ya, ahora Milton, a ver si puedes prender tu video.
Ahí sí.
Ese fue Patricio. Gracias, Patricio, eres un genio.
Muchas
Ya,
gracias. ¿Ah?
ya después me devuelve el co-host, por favor, para poder darle la palabra.
Si me indicas cómo hacerlo también,
Sí, no hay
feliz. Así
problema,
que no hay problema con eso.
bueno, muy
Oye,
bienvenido y muchas gracias, Milton, también por unirte con nosotros. Milton, como lo presenté hace un momento atrás, es de Freeport. Y te doy la palabra, Milton, para que hagas tu
Thank you very
presentación.
much, Milton, for joining us. And now I give you the floor. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So please let me know. Okay, you can see my presentation? Yes, perfectly. Yes. So good morning. Now we're going to carry out a quick introduction. I think many of the points were already touched upon by Loreto and Herman. Obviously, I'm going to give you a little bit of context of Freeport. Freeport is known for our operations in Labra. It's relevant in the copper industry, so I'd like to continue with that introduction. Freeport is an international company, and it's focused basically on copper production, but it's one of the few companies that has a moly mine, not just as its product, but also direct use in mining in its operations. It has more than 10 mining operations in the world, but also it's highly integrated into the value chain. We have mining operations, we have the refinery, and also we also manufacture products that end up being manufactured as car batteries. So having this level of diversification, such as North America, South America, Indonesia, means that the production challenges for the ore is greater, and that the value chain is even more complicated, and that it has specific challenges in each one of the regions. So then, the way we have a more strategic plan, the coordination, and as Viviana mentioned, we could align to all the challenges in the production of critical ore is very important, especially regarding the transparency required for these processes. We have more than 25 years in mining operations, and also we have reserves that will allow us to operate for many more years. Something that I think is very interesting and that I heard on another panel a few days ago, practically that everything we consume comes from mining or is processed, or the products are processed through some type of ore or mineral for mining. In this case, copper plays a more critical role due to the decarbonization, electrification that are taking greater hold in a more technological world that's more autonomous with the development of new technologies. Therefore, copper plays a critical role in the transition to a decarbonized economy. So the objective we have as a company, the responsibility we feel is greater. And we also see how the increase in production will add to this and how we will add to this level of demand and how we can maintain all these standards and generate products with a lower carbon footprint in our value chain. And this is something that's very challenging. At end, as Freeport, we developed a climate change strategy based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is reduction, which is perhaps the pillar we're all discussing here, how we're able to reduce our GHG emissions in our operations, and also the value chain. To date, and in the milestones that we've been able to hit in 2020 to 2023, we've been able to formalize our climate change strategy and goals in the different regions and the different challenges from where and how we operate. But also, reduction, it plays an important role. We believe that within the pillars of climate change, we see resilience, which is basically how we adapt our operations to the new risks, the risks that are growing in matters of climate change. And as I mentioned before, how we can contribute responsibly to the production of copper that will allow us to support this energy transition. Here we see something that's very relevant and that I'd like to highlight, and that it is how we as an industry and value chain continue developing solutions that allow for the tackling of decarbonization in a more collaborative way. We see the issue come up that we cannot do this alone. These problems are common to the industry, and that we have worked with various standards, and that today our challenge is to continue to innovate and do things differently to maintain this business on the one hand, and also on the other hand, to have sustainable production throughout time and to have the support of various stakeholders. This is a process that requires time, and that even though we feel very proud of the milestones we've hit in the last few years, we believe that we need to continue aiming high, promoting this, and developing new goals and new challenges. This is something which is a continuous process, and that will require more collaboration from the industry, specifically the copper industry. The high grade initiative really highlights our collaboration with the providers. The copper industry is connecting to everything that has to do with a decarbonization approach in a way that we can coordinate in such a way and define goals in the best way possible in a transparent manner. Now, with regards to the challenge we have as Freeport and CO2 emissions, now, according to the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, Freeport's profile is one that moves between 7 to 8 million tons of CO2, which sometimes we do not understand its magnitude. But what I want to highlight here is that the Scope 3 emissions with regards to the value chain and why the challenge is so important, it's because when we add the value chain to all the processes before we process the material, it represents 43%. So more than Scope 1, more than our Scope 2 emissions, and we have less control of it. Therefore, the question is, how can we develop solutions and promote challenges in a coordinated fashion? That is one of the areas we're working on, so we can collaborate with the ICMM and also the World Copper Organization. And previously, as we mentioned, since it's integrated in the value chain, we see the processing plants, the refineries, the moly mining, but mainly how the copper value chain can tackle these challenges in decarbonization is what's going to mainly allow us to reduce these emissions on the one hand, and on the other hand, to coherently manage Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions in a coordinated fashion to reduce them throughout time. So how do we aspire to do this in order to reach a net zero 2050 economy? which is one of the greatest challenges we have. I believe that there's something that's well established here, which is decarbonizing the energy matrix. We see the hydrogen electrical equipment as a solution. There's many solutions that are arising. And of course, we need to continue to promote energy efficiency, the use of the assets, innovation of processes. So apart from these four levers that we have that we're using throughout time, we see something that is happening, and we believe is very important, that these levers cannot be developed individually. There's many things of these that require collaboration. Viviana mentioned the ICSB, which has to do with equipment decarbonization. It's being done in collaboration with mining companies and equipment suppliers. All of this has to do with an open process to listen to what exists. Therefore, decarbonization internally of our operation has to be within the limits of our mine sites, but also what happens in the value chain holds challenges that require a different way of tackling them. So even though these are our internal levers that allow us to join a net zero economy, we believe that many of these things that apply in the value chain need to be seen in this traceability initiative, the high grade traceability initiative. Thank you very much, Loreto. And now open to take any questions. You're on mute. Okay, right, there we go. Thank you very much, Milton. Very interesting what the company is doing. And through your presentation, we've seen many questions come up. So first of all, you have three dots, right? It says mute and three dots. And in your picture, right? You have three. And
No, Loreto, tú sigues siendo el host. Nosotros somos para poder tener el video encendido.
No, yo no sigo siendo, no aparezco como host.
Ah, yo te veo como host.
¿En serio?
Sí.
Espérate, deja ver acá. Ah, no, aquí ya. Voy a hacer a Herman ahora. Espero que no se desaparezca Milton, ¿ah? Espérate, voy a hacer a Herman ahora. Ya, Herman, eres co-host, deberías poder prender. Bien, ya, ahora sí.
Gracias.
okay, now it works. Wonderful. Let's not touch anything. Well, we've never had this happen, and we've been doing this for 3 years, and we've done around 150 Zooms at least. But well, there is always a first time. Here we go. So thank you very much, all three of you. We have many questions, especially on this new initiative. And just as you mentioned, it has many challenges because it goes beyond the mining companies such as Teck and Freeport. It has to do with external suppliers, so how we manage it, how we control it. I'd like to know how the work table functions. ICMM is one that takes a table to the providers. How does this work? Because there's a question from P. Mendez, who's in the chat, that says the methodological challenges are very important, but it's incipient. So what enabling conditions exist to advance appropriately? So basically how it works in practice, and I think Milton and Herman showed us that there are many meetings that take place in executive committee, but who is the umbrella that you act under? So I know that you learn from mistakes, of course, but the impact that it can have. And as you mentioned, Viviana, I believe you said that 80% of emissions are of scope 3 are related to the value chain. Is that the number you gave?
Claro, depende del tipo
Right. It depends on
de
the
minera, porque
type of mining
hay mineros
activity,
que producen
because the mines
desechos que
that
emisiones de alcance 3 mucho
produce
mayores, cerca de
precious
un
metals,
30%.
they have around a
Pero
30% scope 3
principalmente
emission.
empresas asociadas al cobre
But those
generan más de
associated to copper, 50 to 75%,
y para
depending on the activity. And for those
producen, por ejemplo, acero o aluminio,
that
la
produce
ya se eleva y puede llegar
steel,
hasta un
well,
99%.
it could reach 99%.
La meta perdón.
Sorry, I just want to say, Viviana, I could add with the question.
Iba a comentar que la mesa de
I was going to say
coordina
the scope 3 table is
Alta Ley, es la
coordinated by Alta Ley, which is the organization that coordinates this initiative, and they organize all these activities. They have their work plan, and we were invited to participate, and Milton can go into greater depth. Of course, I just wanted to give you support in that answer. And these initiatives, and with a different point of view, this project is managed with these various discussions, and Alta Ley is the one that makes the call to participate. They've worked previously with suppliers, footprint measurements, so they come up as an interesting initiative to be able to call the copper mining industry players to work together, mainly with two objectives: to align methodology, the same work of ICMM, general for the companies, and this has to do with the development of standards, but not developing too many standards for each company, but to actually do it in a coordinated fashion and aligned fashion to make more efficient work. So this has a methodological side, and it also has a second area, which has to do with providers and suppliers. Therefore, the table is constituted by 8, if I'm not mistaken, 8, 9 mining companies that participate today with Teck, Codelco, Anglo American, among others. And we see this need of working with the suppliers because the suppliers that have a company can also work with other companies. So we see a synergy arise. And this synergy can be tackled and supported by optimizing work, optimizing resources, developing capacity, and to work together in a unified fashion with a unique discourse that reaches the suppliers. So we see that there's work in scope 3. It's unified, and as we said before, it works with capacities. So this table is composed, and we call to work ICMM and ICA with their previous work, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And also, we didn't want to be disconnected in process in Chile. Therefore, as we said, this generates a new process, an open process, with the main international stakeholders, also working with local organizations such as a mining council, Atrimin, Huella Chile, among others, that give you a relation with local stakeholders that value the process and that allow it to be according to the local reality. Super. Herman, do you want to add something? Yes, perhaps to add that, just to add to what's been said, that all the commitments of carbon neutrality in mining are individual commitments of each company, and right now they're working together to have a common view as an industry. But obviously, the incorporation of the criteria varies according to the life cycle of the project, be it a mine or project, and they have different stages, which means they have different levels of emission. Therefore, the work there to be done is very important, and it also defines how we're going to advance towards 2015, the diversification of the portfolio. What are the initiatives that can help to fulfill, or at least not increase, the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? Another point of background information is working with suppliers in mining is absolutely key. Some of the internal conversations that we have in Teck are very important, and we've had a huge work on how we can have more suppliers that belong to the zones, the regions we operate. Therefore, I would say there's a concern related directly to how we can support this. A while ago, we incorporated social community character aspects in the evaluation of the tender processes. It would not be unusual then that carbon neutrality elements, level 3, be incorporated into the tender processes in the future. Therefore, the work and value in mining will fulfill with these commitments. So I believe that just a few months ago we started, and there's going to be work that's going to be intensified in a greater manner. And as the years go by, it's going to require more efforts. So I see this as a great opportunity to improve and implement first-rate sustainability in the management of suppliers and mining. Very interesting, Herman. And I just wanted to ask Viviana, on the international level, since here we see that we're talking about the suppliers, how would you say that the mining suppliers has integrated in emission controls with mining companies? Is it a simple process with little resistance, or is it difficult to implement in other countries? As Herman said, perhaps there are other working tables, other experiences that have a longer experience. How do you evaluate this in the ICMM, the Chilean experience? Right. I believe that the work with suppliers, specifically for the mining sector, is very challenging, and some of the member companies have more than 3,000 suppliers. It's crazy the amount of suppliers, geographical locations, etc. Many of them are also small companies, local providers. So it's very difficult to hold this relationship with all the suppliers to work together, because the idea, according to the ICMM principles, and those that are part of the ICMM, will integrate the local communities in the development of mining and not exclude them. So we have the fair transition, and to not increase, to actually help local companies and providers and suppliers to work with this. And this requires a lot of work to be able to establish this relationship with each one of the suppliers. And obviously, the number of providers varies from company to company, but it's always a challenge. There, we need to focus on those where we see the greatest amount of emissions and opportunity to reduce them as well, and to work together. This initiative on the world level is not something that's seen in all geographic locations. It's new, and it's worthwhile imitating in other areas. Our member companies are making the efforts of relating and working with their suppliers, but it's not easy. It's a long term, and many of the contracts are short term. So it's difficult sometimes to have that relationship, but we have very good examples from our members that have started to do this work, and the idea is to continue strengthening this throughout time. So Viviana, There's no similar experiences in the world, according to what you've seen in ICMM. To traceability, well, there's no other initiative that works with the same focus in a coordinated fashion, according to what I've seen. And we share the interest with Alta Ley, and we're coordinating. As Milton said, there's a pilot program that can be a very good experience and that can be replicated in other countries, and that this can impact the effects. And the pilot program is open to any companies that wishes to join us and that wants to also work with suppliers that support this project. So there's many opportunities to continue to carry out advancements together. Herman, did you want to say something? Well, no, just to add that Chile is a world leader in the implementation of mining standards. The various mining companies, be it national and foreign, that mine ore in Chile have a very great integration process on the company level. So here we see the commitments are translated to their implementation to the various countries. In this case, Teck has one of the most important copper production areas as Chile, without a doubt. So here, this is where you actually define the standards. So your emissions will be greatly marked with what you do in the operations here. So here is where you need to place the efforts to advance in measurements and mitigation of emissions, as we talked about. So as I said before, this is a topic that is happening. It's happening in Chile. The first steps are being taken here. And this is something that will continue strongly in the next few years. There is a question here from Jimena Almos that says, is there a good availability of data to study the footprint? So are you creating a local database? How will this be followed up based on what information? And how will you measure this? So the guide presents a level 3 calculator. And here basically we need to use the criteria and methodology to achieve the same results. So we could work, as Viviana said, or Milton. There's a transversality in the region for this. So we cannot have different calculations. Otherwise, it will become complicated. So I think Jimena mentioned it. We see the methodological tool, coordinated work, and now we have this first pilot program, which is going to be done with the suppliers that will allow us to check how things are measured, etc. So I think that can answer the question. Right, exactly. Christian Perez says, the important thing in Chile is that we standardize the emissions factor, a little bit about what you were saying, and also Cecilia Gasic, I think is the name. How many suppliers in Antofagasta monitor emissions? Now, according to what you just said, this guide establishes certain guidelines to which the suppliers have to adequate themselves. So how do you train suppliers, are there important gaps? I imagine it's a huge learning experience from large mining to smaller mining, from Komatsu to the sales of screws. So, right, yes, I've been connecting with the questions, and it's related to that. There's an important part in this table that has to do with the development of capacities. We have very important points. One, as Viviana mentioned, and in ours, mining companies have more than 3,000 suppliers. So what we would have to measure to have specific measurements of scope 3 emissions is huge. So it's something we're going to improve throughout time. And also the capacities between large companies and small companies, local companies, and multinational companies vary quite a lot. So what each company has developed in each of their companies is hugely variable. So how we travel down that path in a way that we could point towards an improvement process to have greater transparency, greater information, and to tackle the more critical suppliers in emissions is something that we've discussed in this table. We can see that throughout time, we need to work hopefully with 100% of the suppliers, but this takes time. So this is on the books, and it's necessary to develop these capacities. A small company, if you ask them to incorporate resources for this, you might make them go bankrupt. They can change their processes and their financial situation. So more than being a standard, it's a guideline for support. What's being developed here is not something that wants to be imposed. It's something that we know is necessary to develop initiatives for decarbonization, to seek improvements. Some companies in the future can incorporate this into their tendering processes. So this is going to happen throughout time, and to which today we're working in collaboration in developing these capacities, and that our suppliers in the various regions and sizes can have our support to develop these capacities, and that can help us develop our emissions and to identify the challenges we have to continue reducing. Super Christian Paris states, we as Flesa Mining, Flesa Minería, I don't know much about them, but we have had trainings from a premium and through the guidance of Alta Ley. So I have a question. Margarita Jaque, I hope she's still here. She's from CAP. She says CAP, through the surgical company Huachipato, which has been in the media, manufactures steel used for the national balls and ball mills for Chile and Peru. The carbon footprint of the balls comes from steel. So how can we join the working table led by the ICMM to support the reduction of scope 3? Is this open? This is a somewhat different industry. So I don't know what you're thinking here. Right. So the pilot program initiative that Milton mentioned and that I mentioned is open to the participation of all the relevant stakeholders. So it's an open initiative and it welcomes everybody that wants to participate. So we need to work together to produce this. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. So I wanted to ask Milton a question. how do you see the development of this initiative from here to a couple of years in the future, according to your experience? Do you see it implemented in senior mining companies? And the same question for Herman from Teck's point of view. Right, that's a good point. The challenge is great, and I believe it's advancing to that level. Now, the concern of the carbon footprint is starting from an electrical vehicle in this traction. So this is happening, and we're at the beginning of the mining value chain as mining companies, that this has taken longer, but I believe it's here to stay. Therefore, the support of this initiative, what we need to continue to promote in the development of capacities, and that these suppliers be more prepared to cover these challenges is very important. So, just like the collaborative work allows to optimize how we reach the vast majority of the suppliers, or if we arrive in a more coordinated fashion, I believe that there's an important challenge in the technology and how to cover it, from measuring the carbon footprint, and also how we could make this transparency information exchange process more efficient, a database, etc., a repository. So I believe that there's the opportunity to advance in parallel, simultaneously in these lines, while we develop capacities, and the suppliers can incorporate this into their action plans, just like us. And we see the generation of technological development help in this. And we cannot just talk with the 3,000 suppliers, but rather one by one to see if they've done this, and if it goes beyond the scope of what can be controlled. So I believe that there's going to be an opportunity for the future, and how technology implementation can help in these processes, capacity development, and the exchange, how this is going to happen, and how the process will be more efficient for all, so that the mining companies don't ask each supplier one by one for certain information, and so that the supplier doesn't have to work with all the clients in the various formats. So I believe there's important opportunities in this. Herman, do you want to add to that? Yes, just to add to that, measurement will always be the first stage that will allow us to identify those areas. So in that sense, when we have the first results, it will open a conversation on the productive areas. So this has to do with understanding the emissions and the working with local suppliers. Working with suppliers is very normal. We work with hundreds of providers a year, developing standardizations of productive processes, information management, and in general, the mining companies work with high level of standards, sustainability, and this demands that these suppliers work with a series of requirements, and this level has to be worked upon so that we can add local initiative to this level of production. So I don't see it in the implementation as so difficult. If it's a mining requirement, I don't see that they're going to transfer their responsibility directly to the contractor, rather that they're going to develop support programs for the implementation of measurement, which will accompany the process. So as we said before, we are just starting a conversation that's going to tackle the development in the next few years. I'm very optimistic in saying that there's going to be many new opportunities in mining and suppliers, as well as in the private sector for consulting, etc., to develop knowledge, dialogue, access to information, which is well aligned with what society demands today. Effectively, that's true. So here we have a question for you, which has to do with sustainability and not necessarily related to traceability of the law, of the grade. So for Teck and Freeport, how possible is it to incorporate electromobility in your projects? And do you have any projects to incorporate trolley or green hydrogen to reduce CO2 emissions in mining? I'll go first, it seems, right? Okay. So one of the lines of action we have in Freeport is the electrification of equipment. And we are in process, just like the majority of the companies, very open to technology. We don't take any technology as given. And we are part of the early learning program of Caterpillar and the consortium with Komatsu. And we're also working with all the large equipment suppliers to be able to understand these technologies, what they're going to require, the impact they require, and management thereof. So since all these technological advancements are coming, the trolley, the support systems, it's also changing. So we're seeing how these programs evolve, and we hope to continue marking certain milestones. For now, we're part of the group. We're seeing what's happening. We're also part of the ICMM, which discusses with mining companies and OEM certain subjects, and we're advancing in a coordinated fashion, expecting to see what will happen. And just to add to the focus of mining, it will be on measurement of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and also those measurements for mitigation and technological solutions allow for those components of a greater impact. Obviously, from the productive point of view, if there's an efficiency, a reduction, and proven technology, obviously, we're going to advance in the implementation of this. But as we said, 51% of the emissions that are level 3 hold a world of opportunity. So the measurement is going to mark those areas of management where you can have a greater incidence in the total measurement. Great, wonderful. Thank you, Herman. Milton. I have a question for Christian Perez from Plaza Mining. It says that they are incorporating scope 3 for their suppliers, but we only see emissions and fuel control and kilometers traveled, but it's been very difficult to get their own scope 2. Do you have an idea of how we can tackle this scope with the suppliers? Well, there's 2 areas for work there. One is educational and supplier development programs. These are seen in all large companies. So therefore, implementation of technologies, well, this would not be too difficult to achieve. And the other thing is to incorporate in the same way. We incorporated different social aspects, assigning points to the information you give within the tender, you can also include other sustainability aspects. There's health, occupational health and safety, communities. So it would not be unusual that these transfer to the tender processes and to cover the standards in emissions for better quality. Great, thank you very much, Herman. Do you want to add something, Milton?
Yo creo que una
Right.
adicional, y entiendo si Flesan también ya estaba trabajando con Alta
So
Ley, digamos,
Flesan is already working with Alta Ley,
que fue una herramienta abierta, digamos, que permite
and it's an open tool
acciones y poder trabajar
that helps us with these
lo
estimates.
más
But I believe that what Herman
relevante, digamos, hay programas
mentioned is relevant.
y formas de hacerlo
There's
también,
programs, there's
pero creo que
ways of doing this,
tienes distintas herramientas
and you also have various tools available for that challenge. Great, thank you very much. Do you wish to add any other comments? We don't have any other questions. Here's a question for you, Herman. Perhaps you want to answer directly internally, which is related to Teck, not related to the webinar. There's a participant that wants to get more information. Viviana, do you have any other general comments on the challenges, on the experience?
Me gustaría comentar que,
Now,
claro,
I'd like to comment that yes,
eliminar las emisiones de alcance 3 puede tener un impacto
tackling
grande en
scope
emisiones
3
globales y al ser
emissions
tan
advancement
complejo,
can have global impact. Since it's so complicated, we need to work together, we need to have synergies, and to take full advantage of these opportunities where we can have a greater impact, which is the objective of ICMM, and it has to do with joining efforts and to work together with the urgency required. Obviously, if each company works on their own, they'll achieve it, but it will take longer. So let's be efficient, let's work together, let's join forces to be able to achieve the objective with the deadlines requirement. And in that sense, we seek that objective. Our members have seen registration of actions and initiatives to record the reduction of emissions, and we could see an impact of scope 3 advancements, and we need to reduce this, especially we see the various aspects. So any efforts that are going to be made will have a huge impact, and this takes a lot of effort to be able to tackle this in the adequate manner and to affect productive activities such as innovation. So in that way, we can achieve the final objective, which is to attack climate change. Thank you very much, Viviana. So I'm going to ask this. The pilot program, when do you think it's going to have a result? Because one of the representatives in Chile, ABAC, one of the councils of APEC, we see a high-level executive, Antofagasta Minerals, and he is participating in a work group in the council that has to do with sustainability. So it'd be super interesting that since this initiative is unique, it'd be super interesting to present results of the pilot program in this council, because in the council, in APEC, we have the main producers of the world. We have Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea, etc. So it'd be very interesting to present this initiative. So how can we access that information? What deadlines exist? Would it be able to be used and shared? Milton, do you have an idea? Is there anything you wish to add? Yes, of course. So first of all, Antofagasta is part of the table, so more than happy to hear about this initiative that you propose. I believe we're completely open to promote this initiative. So, as Viviana started, so this has to do with the model, the way that it's being tackled, that an industry is related to suppliers, to entities that coordinate and allow for the enablement of this locally, and to share this management model that can't be presented anywhere. Now, with regards to your question on the working program, as a table, we're defining the work with these suppliers. There's work with Codelco Alta Ley, and this work table is starting its work with this new cycle of suppliers. And I understand that from here to September, we will achieve our first results and collaborative work with them. So then, Antofagasta is in this table, and I believe we can work in promoting these initiatives. And perhaps we can invite everybody in checking the website www.huellaminera.cl. There's a tool that's being developed for the calculation, and there's a manual. This will allow us to have greater visibility. And at the end of the year, we should have a first report that will allow opening to discussion. This first pilot program will help us see what the best ways are in measurement and to make it more extensive in the value chain for mining. Therefore, the main message is that this is something that's just starting, and in the next few years, it's going to be a more habitual discussion, and we're going to have a development program in this. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank all three of you. Viviana, thank you for joining us and the ICMM experiences. The same for Milton and Herman. It's been very interesting to hear what is being done through the mining companies. So next year, perhaps we can carry out a new meeting, if not before, so we could work together with them and APEC this year. The APEC will be held in Peru. In fact, the president of the advising council is Julia Torreblanca, Freeport, Peru. She is leading that work, so I think that can be something we can see next year. And we wanted to thank everybody for the work they're doing. And thank you very much for having participated in this webinar. And I'd like to thank our loyal audience. This material will be left available it will be sent to the emails as well. And Viviana Huerta, you can share this video through the streaming. It will be recorded in English so that everybody can see it from abroad. So once again, thank you. And until next time, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to participate, and I'd love to meet again. Thank you. Thank you. Of course. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.